Hello and welcome to people who are just joining us. Good afternoon, Pranda, Croeso, to this online workshop being organised by Hub Cymru Africa about how to stay safe and confident during the election period. My name is Julian Rosser. I'm the head of Hub Cymru Africa, and it's really good to see you here today. As we're aware, the Senedd elections will be happening in about a month's time. Campaigning is getting going. Manifestos are being released at the moment. I hope none of you is actually reading through the Plaid Cymru manifesto while you're in this meeting, but campaigning is gearing up. Election times can be quite exciting. It's a good time to engage politicians, particularly if you're somebody who wants to see changes happening in the world. And the reason that we're all engaged in the kinds of work that we do and the kind of charity work that we do is because we want the world to be a better place. And if we want the Welsh Government and future Welsh governments to engage in the world and be globally responsible, then we need to campaign, we need to lobby them, and it's because of civil society in Wales that we have some of the policies that we do in place. It's because of campaigning by charities, by community groups, and by organisations in Wales that we've got things like Welsh Government support for global health partnerships. We've got Welsh Government support for things like a Fair Trade Nation, Wales Africa Community Links, and deforestation-free policies. And Hub Cymru Africa itself has released a list of policy asks of things that we'd like to see the next Welsh Government implementing. So it's quite normal for charities to get involved in campaigning, quite usual for charities and community organisations to get out there and say the things that they want to see happening in the world and happening through politics. But it does come with risks. There are legal risks, there are reputational risks when charities and groups go out there and get involved in political debate. So we need to be clear, what can your organisation do legally? What can you, as a staff member or a trustee, do without getting into trouble? And this is especially the case if you're running a charity. So we've asked a number of experts to come and share their knowledge with you and with the broader sector. And I'll introduce them as they come and speak. But we're really very happy to have with us today Hugh Owen from Electoral Commission Wales. We've got James Wilkinson and Ben Wilson from the Charity Commission. And we've got Paul Shackson from the Welsh Refugee Council. So the idea is that in this session, you'll learn how to express your personal political views without putting your charity at risk. We'll talk about what your charity can and cannot say about the elections. We'll look at what the pre-election period is and whether it affects your activities. We'll also talk about how to engage with candidates for the Senedd appropriately and confidently, and particularly thinking about how those rules apply specifically to Wales Africa organisations and the community sector in Wales. We'll finish with a short discussion on what those guidelines mean in practice for small charities like yours, especially those without paid staff, and those who want to stay compliant while advocating for their communities and their partners. This meeting is being recorded. So if you don't want to appear on the video, then please, one thing you can do is just keep your camera off. You can change your name if you want to be very, very discreet about being here or not. And if you get in touch with myself or with Kath, you can do that in the chat. Then we can always delete your contributions from video if you don't want that to appear on YouTube later. We would encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat box, just to say a little bit about who you are, what organisation you're representing today. And also, we would encourage you to add any questions that you've got to the chat box as well. We won't be taking interruptions while people are speaking, but there will be an opportunity then, as they finished, and we're asking for questions. We'll go to the chat box and see what's happening in there, and we'll see what we can pull out to put to people directly. Um, so if there's nothing more important to say, then I think what we can do is start off hearing from the Electoral Commission in Wales about their advice on how to deal with this period. So I'll start by going to Hugh Owen, please.
Lovely. Thank you, Julian. Just while I pull my slides up, I'll introduce myself briefly. As Julian said there, my name is Hugh Owen and I work for the Electoral Commission in Wales. My job title is incredibly long, so I'm not going to bore you with that. Instead, I'll go straight on to what I'm presenting. As long as everyone can see that, I'll just get a thumbs up from Julian or Kath. I can see you both on the screen. Lovely. Let's do this very, very quickly and succinctly, because I'm sure you're all going to have many, many questions for me. Just a brief overview of what we're going to cover. So what is a non-party campaigner? What you need to do to register as a non-party campaigner, which, judging by the background that I've been provided on those of you on the call today, none of you will need to do, but I'll leave it on there just in case, because you never know who's on these calls. A little bit about campaign spending, a little bit about imprints, and then a short time for some Q&As. So what is a non-party campaigner? Essentially, a non-party campaigner is anyone who campaigns in the lead up to the Senedd election that is not a registered political party. That could be you as a private individual, or that could be you as an organisation, and anyone can spend up to £700 on regulated campaign activities in Wales. Certain types of UK-based individuals and organisations are eligible to register with us as non-party campaigners, and you can spend up to £10,000. So if anyone is thinking of spending more than 700 quid, please do let us know. And if you are a registered non-party campaigner, then you can spend up to £30,000. Although, again, I'm not sure that's going to be many of you on this call today. All non-party campaigners must comply with imprint requirements on election material, regardless of spending level or registration status. That's why I've left that section on imprints in there. I will note here, obviously this is being recorded, I'll also share the slides, so don't worry about taking notes or writing down any emails or contact addresses, because I'll make sure you've got all of those. There are two types of non-party campaigns, both of which I think might be relevant today, depending on who's on the call. One of those is local campaigns, and that's whether you're campaigning for or against one or more individual candidates in a particular constituency. So, thinking about who's on the call, we might have an organisation based solely in Cardiff who's going to be campaigning in Caerdydd Penarth and Caerdydd Ffynnon Taf. That would be classed as a local campaign because you're not going outside the boundaries there. A general campaign is for or against one or more party list candidates or parties, or category of candidates, which is probably the important thing for today. And those who support a particular policy fall into that. Those campaigns are regulated by us, and they're the ones we will be covering in detail here. If you're running a local campaign, we can provide some advice and support, but those are regulated by the police. You don't need to worry too much about that, unless you're planning on saying something really, really out there, in which case I would check in with us and your local police force if you're planning on doing something like that, but I don't think any of you are. Those campaigns apply in the regulated period, which started on the 7th of January 2026 and runs until polling day on the 7th of May. Any spending linked to regulated campaign activities that are used during this period are counted towards your spending limit. This includes the things on the screen there, so things bought before the period but used during it, certain goods or services received for free or at a non-commercial discount, spending shared with joint campaign partners, which I think is something that is going to be fairly relevant for organisations on the call, so I'm going to cover that in a little bit of depth later. And and spending on regulated campaign activity that also relates to other elections in Wales taking place during the regulated period. Now, as far as I'm aware, we don't have any council by-elections or anything like that happening, although one might have missed one somewhere, so you can ignore that last bullet. In terms of the types of regulated activities, it includes the producing or publishing of public materials, doing canvassing or market research, press conferences and media events, transport for campaign publicity, and public rallies or events. To assess if any spending you'll be doing on the Senedd election is regulated, we apply something called the purpose test, and following that, the public test. So the purpose test looks at those activities and says they are regulated if they can be reasonably regarded as intended to promote the electoral success of one or more party list candidates, political parties or candidates who support or do not support particular policies, or another particular category of candidates by influencing voters to vote in a particular way. To give you an example of that, if you were running a general campaign, so one across Wales, and you said, don't vote for party A because they are, I'm trying to think of a policy here, they're anti-tree planting, that would pass the purpose test because you are trying to influence voters to vote against that party and that policy. If you put something out publicly that said, we are supportive of tree planting, that's not trying to influence voters to vote, because you're asking, all you're saying there is, this is what our organisation supports. Hopefully that's clear. When we apply the purpose test, we look at these key factors. Is there a call to action to voters? So don't vote for party A because they're against tree planting. What the tone of that is it we trying to encourage people to vote or not vote a particular way based on the wording, what the context and timing is. So have party A just announced their manifesto and said they're against tree planting, and then 30 seconds later you put something out to say we are for tree planting. How a reasonable person would see the activity as well. As it says at the bottom there, promoting parties or categories of candidates can be implicit rather than explicit. The second part of this is the public test. So the public are involved if materials are made available to the public or a section of the public. You conduct canvassing or market research seeking views or information from members of the public, or you organise a public rally or public event. In the box there, as you can see, is it public? Yes, anything you put on your website, social media, or leaflets sent to the general public. If you just send something to your signed up supporters to that mailing list only, that's not public and would not pass the public portion of that test. Some things that are non-regulated activities: publishing in newspapers, periodicals, or licensed broadcasts, translating materials, additional costs for disabled individuals to participate or work on campaign activities, volunteer time, which is probably something quite key to most of you on the call, I think, personal travel, accommodation, or other reasonable expenses, unless those are reimbursed, reasonable security expenses, and spending already counted towards a registered party or candidate's campaign. I'm assuming this section is not going to be relevant to most of you because most of you probably won't have the budget to be spending up towards those limits I mentioned earlier. But should you need to register, you can register if you are an individual on the UK Electoral Register or a UK resident, a UK registered company, LLP, trade union, building society, friendly industrial or provident society, a UK-based unincorporated association, Royal Charter body, Scottish Partnership, or charitable incorporated organisations. There we go. There's a full list available in our guidance, and when I share this presentation around, I will share links to all of our guidance as well. That's just how you register, and do it online, download the form, complete it, send it to by email or by post. As I said, I don't think many of you are going to be doing that, if any of you, but put it in there anyway. If you do need to register, you need to ensure all spending on regulated campaign activity is authorised through the responsible person. Keep invoices or receipts for payments over 200. Check and record donations over £500 made towards your regulated spending. Report certain donations and all campaigning after the election. Briefly cover campaign spending now, particularly around joint campaigning, which I think might be relevant to some or all of you on this call today. In some circumstances, campaigners working together on a joint campaign will need to treat all spending as their own. This is where there is an agreement for at least one campaigner to spend money on regulated campaign activities as part of the joint campaign. Non-party campaigners who engage in the following activities are unlikely to be joint campaigning, however, and this includes things like endorsing another campaign by allowing your logo or brand to be used without any financial commitment or further involvement. So say Hub Cymru Africa put out a general letter to all parties and you as a small organisation in the Vale of Glamorgan pop your logo on that, fine, don't need to worry about that. Same as adding your signature to a letter alongside other non-party campaigners without any financial commitment. Speaking freely at an event, holding discussions about areas of common interest without coordinating campaign activity, or lending items or donating to another non-party campaigner. The other thing that may be of interest to people on this call is hustings. So a hustings is a meeting where candidates or parties debate policy and answer questions from the audience. I hope you all know that. And usually spending on hustings is low and is unlikely to meet the unregistered spending limit. There are two types of hustings, however, they are selective and non-selective, and spending on selective hustings can be regulated. Your hustings will be non-selective if you have invited all of the candidates or parties known to be standing in the constituency, region, or other electoral area, or you have impartial reasons for not inviting certain candidates or parties. Impartial reasons include security concerns or inviting participants based on previous election results or polling. I live in Caerdydd Penarth. If I was hosting a hustings for that constituency, to be non-selective, I would have to invite every party standing in that constituency to attend. Doesn't matter if they say no, or you know they're going to say no, you have to invite them. You have to make the invite for it to be considered non-selective. That doesn't apply if somebody from Party A in that constituency has, for example, made a threat or has said something about the organisation I work for that leads me to believe there will be a security concern, or they have not stood in the constituency, the party hasn't stood in the constituency before and therefore has no real election result history or polling base. Your hustings will be selective if you have invited only some of the candidates or parties known to be standing in the constituency and you do not have impartial reasons for doing so. This includes not inviting people based on their views or policies. So you might not like certain policies from Party A, but if you are hosting a hustings, you have to invite them for it to be non-selective. If a selective hustings takes place in a regulated period, then the spending will be regulated and will count towards your spending limit. Very briefly on imprints. Some campaign material must contain details to show who is responsible for the material to provide transparency. Imprints are required on digital and printed material, and the test for whether an imprint is required is very similar to the purpose test. An imprint must include the name of the printer and the promoter and any person on whose behalf the material is being published. To give you an example here, you can see they're printed and promoted by. That's nice and easy. Digital imprints must be included as a part of each piece of material. For social media posts, unpaid, if you stick something out on your own social media, provided the overall profile and posts are transparent, we will not take action if you include the imprint somewhere directly accessible. So one click away is what we say. So if you stick something up on X and you can click on a link and it takes you to your website and there's an imprint there, if you need one, then that is absolutely fine. It's highly unlikely that anything that you're putting out will require an imprint, because your campaigning activity, any campaigning activity you do, is very unlikely to be regulated. However, if you do have any concerns about whether or not something you want to do will be regulated, our guidance is available at the website there, and I'll share links to the relevant bits with this presentation. You can email us info@electoralcommission.org.uk, or if you want to talk to us in Welsh, gwybodaeth@comissionetholiadol.org.uk, and the phone number there is bilingual as well, so you can speak to us in English or Welsh there. We are always happy to take a look at anything you think might be regulated, or discuss anything you think might be regulated as part of your campaigns. We would much rather you come to us and say this might be a thing than somebody make a complaint to us afterwards.
James Wilkinson and indeed Ben Wilson from the Charity Commission.
Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being with us today. My name is James Wilkinson. I'm a strategic policy advisor at the Charity Commission. Ben, I know you've already said hello to everyone, but do you want to just introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ben Wilson. I'm the Assistant Director for External Relations here at the Charities Commission. Good to be here today.
Great, thanks, Ben. So we're really pleased that charities such as yourselves are thinking proactively about how you can engage in campaigning and political activity as we draw nearer to polling day. I know that for many of you, it'll be a really important moment to make a difference on behalf of your beneficiaries. So today we'll provide a bit of a whistle-stop tour on some of the key elements of our guidance, and then we'll signpost you to some of the guidance we have available on our website for a more detailed look as well. Do feel free to post questions in the chat, and then we can come on to answer those at the end. Next slide, please. So just to briefly start with the value of campaigning, the law is clear about the right of charities to campaign, and this plays a really important role in society. And so that's why the Charity Commission is taking opportunities to emphasise this message throughout the coming weeks as we approach polling day. However, in order to maintain public confidence in your campaigning and trust in charities more generally, it's crucial that you campaign in a way that's consistent with the legal framework. And so that's where we'll focus today. The headline point is that political activity must support a charity's purpose and be in the charity's best interests. And so that means campaigning may be an effective way of achieving your objectives, but it may not be. That's a case-by-case decision that the charities will have to make for themselves. That being said, political campaigning cannot be all that a charity does in the long term, or be the sole reason for a charity's existence, and that's because charities can never have a political purpose. So whilst charities cannot be party political, they can support a policy that's then in turn supported by a candidate or party. The reason that we have these rules is that the charity sector is meant to be independent, and that independence is a big part of the reason public trust charities, indeed trusting them more than any political institutions. On to the next slide, please. So what is political activity? Well, this is defined as any activity with the aim of changing or influencing policies or decisions taken by governments or public bodies. That's quite a wide definition. It includes global bodies like the United Nations, but also local ones like your local NHS trust. So many charities can and do campaign internationally, and where they do, the rules are the same. So, for example, where a charity focused on providing humanitarian aid overseas undertakes political activity to change the government's approach to foreign policy in a particular area, this would be within the rules, so long as that political activity furthers the charity's purposes, is in the best interests of the charity, and does not become the sole activity of the charity. Now, we understand that political activity very often involves working with politicians or the public to obtain support for a change. So if that same charity put out materials urging its supporters to vote for one particular party or candidate because they supported the charity's position, as Hugh pointed out earlier, that would not be allowed, as it clearly kind of crosses the line into that party political activity. A brief word on campaigning then. So this one's a bit more self-evident, and it refers to those less political forms of campaigning. So awareness raising, educating, mobilizing public support for a particular issue. An example might be a charity seeking to increase public understanding of a humanitarian crisis overseas, or it might be a charity looking to increase public awareness around the dangers of smoking, something like that. Next slide, please. So this slide covers some of the top tips for trustees or for those advising trustees considering getting involved in political activity and campaigning. So first things first, it's always good to start with the basics and to check the charity's governing document. There may well be express powers in the governing document that help support your charity's political activity. Equally, there may well be restrictions, so it's important to know what's noted down there. As with all charitable activities, ultimately what the Commission will be interested in is the trustees' decision-making. So it's really important that trustees disregard irrelevant factors in that decision-making, such as their own personal feelings or beliefs, or the kind of personal political feelings or beliefs of volunteers or staff of the charity. So that means trustees need to be very clear that the political activity they're undertaking is in the charity's best interests and not in their own personal interests or the interests of anyone else. Again, as always, it's important to keep proper records of decisions, and that record keeping should be proportionate. So we expect to see more detailed records where trustees are engaging in higher risk political campaigning. The last word on this slide is about working with politicians. We know that many charities work with their local members of the Senedd or other politicians, and that is absolutely fine, so long as you maintain your charity's independence. And so that means politicians should not be using charity events to promote a party political message, and charities are not able to give money or resources to candidates or promote a particular party or candidate. So we do encourage charities to engage with politicians from across the political spectrum, and that can help ensure that the charity is seen to be independent of party politics, and also can be helpful to ensure that your priorities are known to whoever it may be that may gain political office in the future. Next slide, please. So we have a range of guidance relevant to charities who are undertaking campaigning ahead of the Senedd election. So I'll send out links to the relevant pieces at the end of this session along with these slides. We also recently published a Senedd election landing page, which includes all of that guidance and some other helpful materials. So we'll make sure to share that as well, but we do encourage you to read through that. Next slide, please. So as we've discussed, it's natural that charities may seek to increase their political activity in the run-up to the Senedd election. However, as we draw near to the election, charities, alongside other forms of campaigners, are likely to face increased scrutiny over their actions by both the media and the public. And so it's therefore important that trustees think carefully about the impact of their campaigning and political activity up to and during the election period. So as you can see from the slide, there are kind of a number of examples of the kinds of activities that you might be undertaking over the coming weeks. But just to talk through one example around events. As we near the election, charities may wish to host events at which politicians and candidates speak. As previously covered, charities are free to invite candidates and political party representatives to public meetings about those issues on which the charity is campaigning. But that being said, charities must not encourage support for any political party. And so one way of doing that is to invite representatives from as wide a political spectrum as possible so that your kind of independence is maintained. That being said, we do appreciate that inviting candidates from a wide spectrum can sometimes be difficult to achieve in practice. So if not everyone responds to your invitation, or if there are some kind of logistical reasons that mean that one or more people don't end up attending on the day, that's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that parties have to be represented every time a charity undertakes any work with political parties. It's more about being balanced in the round across all of your engagement across the election period. Further to that, you may make a decision to exclude one or more mainstream parties from such an event if you believe this to be in the best interests of your charity, but you'd need to have very strong reasons for doing so, and these reasons must be clearly recorded. Again, as Hugh mentioned, one very strong reason might be something like you've received credible evidence of a safety or a security threat arising from the attendance of one particular party or candidate. There may well be some other reasons as well, so we'll come on to those a bit later on. So that's just one example, and our guidance does explain some of the other kinds of precautions you might want to take when you're engaging in these kinds of activities. So again, please do read through the relevant guidance. Next slide, please. So I think I'm handing over to Ben now to cover the social media aspect of the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, James. And Kath, could you skip on one more for me, please? Thank you. So as we all know, social media can be a very powerful communication tool for charities to help you raise awareness of your causes, and of course to raise funds, importantly, and to better engage with beneficiaries and supporters. So it can help you reach a much wider audience in a way that's much more efficient than perhaps we may have been used to 20 or 30 years ago. But, and forgive me if this is teaching you to suck eggs, there are also risks with it in that the fast pace of social media activity can mean that content is posted without due consideration, and that in the light of day is considered inappropriate or indeed harmful. And it's very difficult, of course, to remove content completely once it is put up into the ether. There's also the risk around how our personal and professional lives can overlap online and become blurred, where it's a bit unclear whether you are speaking for your charity or for yourself. So the Commission, very conscious of these issues, has produced some specific social media guidance, which you can find freely online, and I'm sure we'll be able to share a link to it when the slides are shared. So if you haven't already seen it, I would encourage you to take a look at that social media guidance. Quite apart from it being now a pre-election period, it contains some useful material. But perhaps we can go to the next slide, Kath, and I'll say a bit about how we see social media during this more sensitive time. And the thing I absolutely want to stress is that the Commission does not want to stop charities from using social media appropriately. We're not here to try and put you off that. We absolutely accept that using social media can help you achieve your purposes, and it can be in the charity's best interests. You just need to assure yourselves that when you're posting and responding to material online, that you are acting in the best interests of your charity. If you are planning to use social media for political activity or campaigning, we would recommend that you should have a written policy which sets out the internal controls for how you will use and manage social media during this period. Now, that should be proportionate to the size and complexity of your charity. We're not expecting small charities to have a 6-page policy, but you need to be able to assure yourselves that in event of something going wrong, for instance, someone with access to the account posting something that is deemed inappropriate, you are able to act and show you how you have acted. You know, we've had a number of regulatory cases where complaints have been raised about social media posts, which we've then looked into and found that the trustees didn't have efficient oversight of the control mechanisms that were in place for posting and then dealing with issues when they arise. Again, to stress, there's nothing to stop charities from engaging on emotive or controversial issues, and indeed using clear, robust, compelling language where appropriate. But you need to be able to assure yourselves and us, if need be, at the Commission, that you are doing so in the best interest of your charity and that it fits with the purposes of your charity. So just say a little bit more about the kind of social media policy which we would recommend you have in place. That should include a clear decision point for when trustees need to be involved if something goes wrong, and who will make that call within either the volunteer base or the staff base. And the policy should also set out the charity's expectations about how trustees, staff and volunteers approach their own personal social media accounts. Again, let me stress, everyone is entitled to freedom of expression, and that includes political expression. And indeed, on an individual social media account, that may well include supporting a particular political party or candidate. Obviously, this is something that a charity from a corporate account cannot do. But you will see that there is a risk there. If, for instance, you had a high-profile chief executive who used their own, let's say, Blue Sky accounts to talk regularly about the work of the charity, and in their bio it said, "I'm chief executive of this charity," but if they were then to post their support for a particular party or candidate, an objective observer may reasonably conclude that it was the charity that was making that endorsement. So the risks obviously are very case specific. We would just encourage you to think about, particularly during this period, how personal accounts may, if you like, bleed into the reputation of your own charity. Again, I suspect that is not a new consideration for you, but one that, of course, is heightened during the time of an election. So, on the next slide, please, Kath. We wanted to bring this alive a bit and talk through, thank you, and talk through a couple of example scenarios. James has touched on some of the thinking behind these. Sometimes we encourage people to put their hands up or put in the chat their answers to these questions. But in the interest of time, I think we'll kind of skip straight into our answers. But as I set out the scenario, you might just want to think about, in your own context, how you would treat the situation. So our first case study is that a charity has decided to host a public event as part of its political activity ahead of the Senedd election. The event is open to the public, and it's designed to allow candidates standing in the election to discuss and debate issues directly linked to the charity's purposes. The trustees are concerned that inviting a candidate from one of the mainstream political parties may create significant safety or public order risks, and so decide to host the event, but without that party in question represented. So if you find yourselves in that situation, what factors might you have reasonably considered, and what would, if it came to a challenge, what might the Commission expect to see some evidence of you having thought about? Let me tell you the answer to that on the next slide, while you no doubt think about the answer in your own minds as well. So first and foremost, in this scenario, there is a trustee duty to safeguard people who come into contact with your charity. And in this instance, that would appear to come into conflict with the legal duty to maintain charities' political independence during the election period. So you are responsible, and trustees are responsible, for taking reasonable steps to protect people from harm, and that includes your staff, your volunteers, your beneficiaries, and indeed members of the public. So if you had strong evidence that indicated a genuine risk of disorder or other harm associated with a particular candidate being there, that would be considered reasonable for the charity to exclude the candidate from that event. But when making that decision, you need to think about the credibility of that evidence. You know, where has it come from? And indeed, it is probably be sensible to discuss that with your local police force as well. Now, at the same time, charities are legally required to remain independent, as we've touched on, and ensure that their engagement with parties is balanced in the round across the election period. Of course, excluding a specific candidate may bring that into question in the eyes of the public. And in this instance, it might be reasonable for you to consider whether there are other steps you could take that would mean that you could invite that candidate. For instance, liaising with local partners to have additional security, or ensuring that, for instance, I know people were encouraged to bring ID to an event, etc. You know, I think there would need to be proportionate and reasonable steps taken to explore whether you had other options rather than excluding the candidate. And in kind of weighing that up, we would expect trustees to follow the decision-making principles that you may well be aware of, and if not, again, freely available on the Commission's website, and that you clearly record the rationale for that decision, as well as any alternative options that you considered. But look, ultimately, all decisions that trustees make must be, again, in the charity's best interests. And it may be that the trustees just decide not to host the event at all, and engage with relevant parties in a different way. That may be an option. Just wanted to touch on a couple of other issues that are closely related to this, because I suspect it will be of interest to those joining. As Hugh very helpfully touched on earlier, ultimately, you know, if you voluntarily decide to run hustings, the point of which is to facilitate democratic engagement with a range of parties, you know, it does place quite a burden on you to exclude people. And we do have specific guidance. Sorry, the Electoral Commission has specific guidance on running hustings, that touches on the information Hugh gave earlier about selective activity. And if you did decide to proceed with that, you'd have to be careful around the costs to make sure that spending may need to be recorded. Just to take a step back for a minute, though, you know, let me be clear that the Commission would not expect all parties to be represented every time a charity undertakes some kind of work with political parties. So, for instance, even during this period, if a candidate had a very particular interest in your specific policy area, it would be fine for you to engage and liaise with them, as long as you could show that in the round across the period of the campaign, you had made reasonable attempts to engage with others, to avoid your impartiality being called into question. Conscious of time, I'll stop there on this slide. Do by all means put any questions in the chat, but if not, I'll hand over to James for our next scenario.
Thanks, Ben. On to the next slide, please, Kath. Thank you very much. So in this scenario, a charity invites an activist involved with relevant issues to a public event to discuss the issues facing the sector. The speaker is not affiliated with the charity, and during the event, the speaker unexpectedly praises a specific political party, urging the audience to vote in a particular way. The trustees are concerned that this statement could be interpreted as the charity itself endorsing that party, putting the public perception of the charity as independent of party politics at risk. So again, if this was a situation that was facing you or your charity, think through what kinds of things you might want to consider. On to the next slide, please. So hosting an event with external speakers may be an acceptable way for a charity to further its purposes during this period, as we've discussed. However, there are risks involved with doing so, and trustees should consider what mitigations they can put in place ahead of the event to manage these risks. So, for example, have you thought about doing a risk assessment before the event to try and determine what risks a given speaker might bring or what topics they're likely to cover? Have you provided the speaker with a written briefing ahead of time to be clear on the charity's duty to remain independent of party politics? Could you consider assigning a moderator or a chair for the event who can intervene if the speaker strays into inappropriate party political territory? And then you should think about if there are any appropriate steps for you to take after the event if you think something has called into question your charity's political independence. So, for example, Would it be appropriate for you to release a public statement clarifying that the speaker's views do not represent that of the charity? Could you link to the policy positions of other political parties via social media after the event to kind of demonstrate your independence and that you're hearing a variety of perspectives? Could it be appropriate for you to review your internal policies and procedures to ensure that those kinds of mitigations are in place for future events? So ultimately, trustees must be clear in any activity it undertakes that the activity is furthering the charity's purposes, as we've stressed, and that activity is in the charity's best interests. Again, please do read through and consider the decision-making principles as you're making decisions in this space. You find those on our website. And it's really important to keep a clear record of decisions in this space as well. That was everything, excuse me, we had for the presentation. I think there's some time for some questions now.
Yeah, there is a bit of time for questions. Thank you very much. We're going to hear now a bit from Paul from Welsh Refugee Council, particularly looking at some of the things that we can do, you know, some of the opportunities that are there and some of the ways that we can get involved in, you know, taking positive action around campaigning and elections. So, Paul, are you good to go?
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. And can I just say it's really interesting. Thank you so much for those presentations, all of you. It is really interesting because it is a very difficult and tricky time for charities. I mean, Ben, I just wanted to touch on social media. Back in January 25, a certain Elon Musk specifically mentioned the Welsh Refugee Council online. The knock-on effect of that was huge to us as a charity. We had done nothing to provoke that, I should say. He just mentioned us specifically on X. But the knock-on effect to us as a charity meant we had to close the office for days, which had a knock-on effect to the people we support. We had to look into reinforced glass. We had direct threats to the lives of our senior leadership team. We had police outside some of our houses because addresses had been shared. So we have certainly been on the horrible side of social media and experienced some terrible things there. So yeah, it can be quite scary at times. And we hadn't done anything to provoke that. I should clarify. But
no, Paul, I don't know what to say. I mean, clearly shocking and abhorrent. It's perhaps a prompt for me just to say that I hope colleagues on the call do know that in those instances, if you wanted the names of your trustees to be withdrawn from the public register of the Commission, we do facilitate that. So in such instances, get in touch, and we will always take very seriously such requests, and indeed look more broadly. Of course, for us as regulator, it is quite difficult to step in and tell Elon Musk is wrong. But I hope some of you may have observed that through some of our public advocacy work, we have been standing up for the right of charities to do what they're here to do within their purposes. And I think it's okay for me to draw a parallel with our findings in the city of Sanctuary just this week, where there had been some online misinformation about a charity encouraging young people to send Valentine's cards to adult asylum seekers, which we could find no evidence for, and we put out a very strong statement saying that this week and addressing that information and defending the right of that charity to do what they were doing within their purposes.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, thanks, everyone. So thank you for the opportunity today to talk about some of the work that the Welsh Refugee Council has been undertaking in the run-up to the election. One of the things I've been leading on is democratic engagement. And I just wanted to briefly show you this presentation I've been making. And this is going out to the people we support and our partner organisations and the people they support to explain the importance of voting in the Senedd election, to explain why it's important in terms of it's quite a historic election in terms of proportional representation and how things are changing, but also the things that are devolved to Wales and what we have particular control over, because we recognise that actually we have to get people that we support engaged in this. They have the right to vote, and that's what we've been explaining to people. So particularly if you've got these kind of statuses, we've been explaining this to people that you can vote in Wales. You need to be a part of this democratic process. So we've been explaining who has the right to vote, as you can see there. We've been talking about why that vote matters. So in terms of the specific issues that are devolved to Wales, such as the NHS, education and housing, some of the examples there of what the Welsh Government has introduced as a result of those devolved powers and how that affects your day-to-day lives. Then we've been talking specifically about what proportional representation looks like and how the system is changing in Wales, talking about the 16 constituencies and how that will work, and 6 members being appointed or voted to each constituency. So really bringing people on board the journey so that they understand Welsh politics a bit more and how to engage. Talking about why it's historic, not just proportional representation, but actually certain things are at stake potentially connected to the nation of sanctuary policy. So talking about the things that could be lost there moving forward, clearly not stating or making reference to any individual political parties. And we make it clear that we are a charity and politically neutral from the outset. But again, importantly, we then go on to show them how to get in touch with their politicians and how best to communicate with them, how to keep those messages brief on email, for example, how to it's best to sort of engage with politicians as a group rather than an individual. So really trying to bring them on that journey into that political process. We've then gone through to explain how to vote using Electoral Commission videos, which I won't play, obviously, but telling them they can vote, obviously, at the polling station, by post, by proxy. So really giving them that kind of detail that they need. We do get asked about particular parties, which we obviously bat off, but we do say how important it is to do your research in the run-up to the election. So we talk about having those questions ready about the issues that affect those individuals. So what is a party's political stance on the nation of sanctuary policy? What is their policy on the NHS and keeping it sort of free at the point of use? What is their housing policy in Wales? Do your research on have those particular parties kept their promises on other things that they've promised they do? So really trying to encourage the people we support to be part of that overall process, to do their research, to understand what those parties are planning to do and what it represents and how it affects them in their daily lives, without us going into any form of detail about an individual party as such. So we've also got that QR code that we use that a lot of people don't recognize or don't realize they have to register to vote. We make it as simple as possible to scan that code and go and register to be part of that democratic process. So I just wanted to sort of share that with you, and that's something I can come and present to yourselves and the people you support if that was of interest. So democratic engagement is a big part of what we've been doing recently. But in line with that, we've also been running events where we are inviting the prospective candidates along from every party. Certain parties simply don't respond to us and don't want to engage. We've had fantastic engagement from all the other parties. So we've held an event, for example, with Keep Wales Tidy, where we had representation from Labour, Plaid and the Greens. We're holding an event next week with our partner organisation, the DPIA, and we've got about 8 members of the Senedd come in, or prospective candidates coming from different parties. And the reason why we do that is to allow the people we support, the people with lived experience, to being able to engage politically in an informal setting, to get their points across, to get across to those politicians what they want to see happening in Wales. So it's almost doing our job for us, but we're giving those people that lived experience that chance to engage and to be part of that process. So we find that that works really well. That's not to say we don't engage as the charity ourselves. We've done a lot of work behind the scenes with our manifesto and with individual parties. Plaid Cymru have announced or launched their manifesto today and have actually used one of our manifesto asks, which is fantastic news for us. But I think it's just about having confidence and making sure the people you support understand they are able to engage democratically in Wales. Politicians do respond. They do want to engage. So we need to take away the fear of doing that, but to provide those opportunities where you can, to provide those informal type of settings and occasions that gives those people with lived experience confidence to engage with political representatives. I think that's really important, and that's what we try to do as much as possible. So it's not just the Welsh Refugee Council saying things, it's the people we support from a number of different parts of the world and the organizations that we partner with. It's giving them a chance to get those points across, and that works really well. And we've had really good feedback from politicians who have come to those events and engaged and found it extremely useful, learned things they didn't know, met people they'd never met before. And that's really important. What I will say, we have had instances as well where we were holding events at the Senedd where we invited all current members of the Senedd. Unfortunately, one member of one political party did leak that event out into the public domain when it was meant to be a closed session for current MSs. That became a little bit problematic, but because it was being held at the Senedd, obviously there was already security in place at that building, and we were able to sort of mitigate any problems there. But obviously, we're not blind to the fact that some parties don't really want to engage in a certain way and can try and cause us as charities problems. But as we've heard today, there are ways of mitigating that. And I wouldn't want that to stop any of us from doing the work we do and engaging as much as possible. But certainly on the democratic engagement work, I'm happy to work with anyone on this call and share that presentation and give presentations to the people you support to encourage them to get involved democratically. And if there's any other advice or sort of examples or support we can give as the Welsh Refugee Council to any of you, then please let me know, and I'd be happy to do so. But yeah, certainly don't be scared to engage, and it is a very important election, no doubt.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Paul. That's yeah, some very good points there. Some slightly worrying things, but there's a lot to be optimistic about as well. Could I ask if anybody has got any questions for Paul about about the election, the process, or if anybody thinks that they would like him to come along to talk to a group. So we've got a question from Kath. Thank you, Kath. Well done. If, as a charity, I want my audience and supporters to engage on behalf of my charity with prospective candidates, what would you recommend as a first step?
Well, obviously, the people you support are no doubt aligned with all your aspirations as a charity anyway. They are your ambassadors on the ground, in essence. I think then it's about giving them the platform and the confidence to engage and to give them that opportunity to do so. We must remember that a lot of people find it quite intimidating to engage. And in the process of my democratic engagement work, a lot of people have talked about how they fear going to the polling stations because, of course, the countries they have fled from, there was massive intimidation at the polling stations. I've had to explain very clearly that the Electoral Commission as an independent body oversees that process and that the elections are run fairly, etc. But I think it's about giving people that platform to engage, Kath, and creating those opportunities as best we can, because it benefits those politicians as well, remember. It's a two-way conversation. We're not just there preaching to them. We're giving them intelligence and information that they need to be able then to do their job and to keep their constituents happy and to achieve the things their constituents want. So we must have confidence in those conversations, I think. So my only advice would be, you'll probably find the people you support are obviously very aligned with the work you do anyway. So it's about just giving them those platforms to be able to express that and to have that engagement.
Okay, fab.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm really sorry to hear about that experience in the Senedd. It sounds horrific. Sorry about that.
Yeah, look, it is what it is, and we made it clear that it was a kind of private event for all members of the Senedd, but unfortunately, as I said, some party made it public to try and whip up some kind of problem. Luckily, there wasn't a problem. As I said, security was already in place anyway. We briefed the Senedd personnel there on what could happen, but luckily nothing did. But it just goes to show you how unfortunately some politicians might try and cause a problem with events you're trying to hold.
Yeah, it's really disappointing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
I'd like to ask Paul, kind of, as Hub Cymru Africa, we've got partner organisations, Sub-Sahara Advisory Panel, Fair Trade Wales, um, Cymru Global, and indeed Global Health Partnerships Cymru, which work with a lot of people around the place. What can we be doing to encourage people to come out and vote, get involved, become part of that political process over the next month?
Yeah, I mean, and time is of the essence now because obviously you have to register at least 12 days before the election. So we are running out of time now if people haven't registered to be a part of that process. Um, I mean, I think working with partners, as you say, is a really good approach, and being able to hold joint events where we can all come together and kind of share our knowledge and share why it's important to people that they do take part. That's what we've been trying to do. So the presentations I've been making are certainly not in isolation. They have been made in partnership with the DPIA, with the Kurdish or Wales Association, Chinese in Wales Association, Ukrainian community groups, for example. BOSO. I try and work with as many partners as I can to bring together a clear and consistent message. And to reach as many people as possible. So, to be honest, I think partnership working is absolutely fundamental because we can't do it all by ourselves. Nobody can. And at the end of the day, I think we're all trying to achieve the same thing, which is stronger communities, that stronger integration, giving people that chance to be part of Wales, both economically, politically, socially. So we all want the same things. So I think to come together as a group more and to offer that kind of guidance and advice on those platforms and opportunities, I think is something we need to do more of, and I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Barbara has a question. If you want to do an analysis of all political parties' manifestos against our own charity manifesto asks, are there any guidance that you could provide on doing that? As she's thinking of copying the relevant information mentioned in their manifestos against headings, so not redacting any of the information that they've provided. But I
Yeah,
suspect, Barbara, that some of those headings might be blank underneath.
yeah. I mean, I'm guessing now, as obviously the manifestos are launched, I'm guessing people are going to be pulling together sort of web pages and platforms where you can easily see and read and be able to sort of gauge each manifesto on particular pledges and how it affects you. I think one of the Welsh universities was actually looking to do this and to sort of clearly highlight what each manifesto is saying and what that means in particular sectors. I think that might have been Swansea University. I'll look into that and I'll come back to you and feed that in. It's not easy, is it? I mean, at the end of the day, people have said to me in democratic engagement presentations, well, how do we know they'll stick to their pledges in their manifesto? And you're like, well, that's politics. We don't know for sure. But we hope they will. Look at their track record on other things. I think, though, I'm sure there will be, as I say, platforms literally in the coming days and next couple of weeks that will be giving more detailed information about each manifesto and what that looks like in terms of particular issues. Off the top of my head, I couldn't really give you the kind of golden answer on that right now. But I'll keep a lookout and I will come back to you all once I find anything.
What I will do is to thank again James and Ben and Paul for coming along and participating. We're really grateful. It's been really helpful to hear from you. And I think we will be making this recording available quite soon on our YouTube channel for groups to be able to, access it again over the next couple of weeks as the election period unfolds. So that should be very interesting, and we will see what happens. How are we doing with filling in the poll? Let's have a look. We have got 4 people participating. A little bit of participation going on in that poll. So let's have a look. Marvelous. Some people are still filling that in. Any final thoughts? Kath, let's ask you if you've got any final thoughts. Who usually good for a final interesting.
On the spot. Thanks, Julian. You know I love that. No, again, thank you very much to the speakers who's gone, but thank you very much to Paul, James, and Ben. Really appreciate your time, and thank you for the questions. I think what I've taken away from this is I think I had a lot of fear before this session because I don't work for Hub Cymru Africa, I work for another charity, and I worried about trying to engage our audiences, engaging candidates to advocate for the needs of the charity, that, what we need as the global solidarity sector of the government to do, the next government to do. And I was anxious about breaking charity rules. So it's really reassuring to hear that actually it's very unlikely that even if I try quite hard, I'm not likely to. So that's good. Although I do take on board the information about particularly charity founders and charity trustees and CEOs that are very much linked to the charity, particularly social media. I think that is at risk for very, very small charities. We do tend to blur those lines sometimes. So I'm definitely taking that on board, both personally and for my trustees. Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for your time.
Brilliant.
And I'm really encouraged by Paul's work and looking forward to seeing how that goes. And if there's any support we can give as the global solidarity sector, please
Thank you.
give us a shout.
Wonderful. Thank you. We can end it there. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks,
you, everyone.
thanks for the opportunity. All the best. Good luck.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.